Well, Josh, I say we get going. I am recording this, so we'll get that posted up in our archives and on our Facebook group and whatnot. So with these guys that are here, let's just kind of hopefully some other people will jump in, but let's get started with this crew right here.
Let's do it. Okay, so there's a couple things that were on my mind to cover tonight. And so, Jeff, you had talked about potentially opening with that, that post that I had sent you from Dave. Now I can't. I want to say I can't remember his last name all of a sudden. I'm going to look up the email I sent you.
Ramsey.
Yeah, Ramsey.
Ramsey post.
My mind was going to Dave Ronald, and I'm like, that is just not right.
It doesn't even ring right.
Yeah, not even close. So I wanted to know if you wanted to, tee that up for a quick conversation, and then there's some great information we came across in regards to household wealth and how that impacts the difference between renters and home buyers. And so there was a few slides I put together to share that data. Okay. And then from there, what I really wanted to see is if people just wanted to kind of jump into a Q&A session from, what's the difference between conventional FHA and Govy mortgages, questions about appraisals, really just kind of open it up for Q&A that your team might have as it relates to different mortgage programs, how to overcome challenges with loans, anything that might be top of mind from a knowledge standpoint. I thought we'd just have a close with kind of an opening Q&A session.
Okay, I like that. So I don't know how many of you might have seen the article or seen anything in the news that Josh is referring to about Dave Ramsey. But what he's done is he has cut off all EXP agents from being able to work his referral program. Kind of doesn't make any sense to me, but part of the article talked about how he thought that the recruiting part of EXP was a distraction to agents being able to do their job as thorough as they could have. And there were some quotes from some agents in there. I mean, some of them were doing hundreds of thousands of dollars in transactions annually through this program. And to all of a sudden just be cut off. To me, I mean, there's a lot of things with Dave Ramsey that as an entrepreneur and as an investor, I don't 100% agree with, or at all. But, financial responsibility is an important topic, and I can appreciate that. But I mean, Josh, what's your thoughts from the outside, not being in the realtor space, when he says that the agents can't fully do their job to the extent that they should be able to because they're in a recruiting brokerage model?
Well, that's kind of like saying, I won't send my referrals to women because they're moms too. And I mean, it doesn't make any more sense to me than that. Or saying that, if a realtor doesn't only do real estate, like if they buy their own investment properties and they're realtors, then there's a conflict of interest. Like, I just don't really see the logic there. I have had a long-standing disagreement philosophically with some of the things that Ramsey says. A lot of the stuff in the general overarching principle, get out of debt, spend less than you earn, maximize your income, minimize your expenses. I can get behind all of that. But as it relates to real estate and mortgage, I think his advice is antiquated. And I know if I would have followed that advice, and a lot of the homeowners that we do business with, they would have been significantly less wealthy. Because essentially Dave says, look, if you don't have a 20% down payment, you shouldn't buy a house, and you should immediately refinance to a 15-year fixed. And those two things are antiquated in my mind. Like, if I think about, I'll just give you an example. Our marketing manager, Colin Jensen, that was over at your office a couple of weeks ago, Jeff. Mm-hmm. Colin bought his first home with 100% financed Utah housing loan. Mike Jones actually did the loan for him about 6 years ago. 3 years later, no, I guess it was 4 years later, because we would have moved companies by then, he refinanced and had 25% equity, not because he'd been making additional principal payments, because the home had appreciated.
Right.
And then 2 years after that, he had another child. He has a lot of children. I don't know if that was the fourth. I think that was the fourth one. He had a fourth child, and all of a sudden the starter home didn't work for him. He sold his home and moved almost $200,000 in equity over to his new home, and didn't put all that money down, paid off every other debt he had in his entire life. So, I mean, if you would have followed the Dave Ramsey model, he'd still be saving for a 20% down. He wouldn't have got there because the price of the home would have outpaced his savings rate. He would
have been chasing it. He would have been chasing it. The more he saved, the more expensive the home was.
Dude, in the last 6 or 7 years over this time frame, he was shooting for a $200,000 house, so he would have needed a $40,000 payment. Now he needs a $600,000 house. He would have needed a $120,000 down payment. He would have never have saved, and he would have been priced out of the housing market with 4 kids. And so I've just seen so many instances similar to that. And to get in and to start earning equity is the pathway to wealth beyond sitting and waiting 5 years to save 20% down. There's just a lot in mortgage and real estate, especially leverage in real estate, that I don't think Ramsey gets. And for him to, in my opinion, make a misstep like this is just more along the same course of he doesn't get real estate and mortgage. That just isn't, I don't see him giving super great advice there. Now, pay off your student loans, all that kind of stuff, high interest rate credit cards, how he cascades debts that he wants to pay off. I can get behind that. But when it comes to mortgage and real estate, I just don't see him as a wise counsel.
I 100% agree. And I think a lot of his talk is geared around consumer debt, and
totally
leveraged investment debt is the best debt you can have. And to lump that in the same, like you mentioned, get into a 15-year mortgage, throw all your money at it just because he's in a position where he's had properties for a while, they cash flow. He talks about taking that money, buying another one for cash because he's got all this cash flow. Well, that's not 99.9% of the population.
Right.
And stories like you just told about Mike, in order to get ahead, period, you have to minimize your risk, but take some calculated risk in leveraging the potential return on an investment that's not student loan debt. That's not an investment, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I 100% agree with you. And I think it's going to backfire on him publicly in a big way for the way he's talking right now.
I totally agree. Yeah, just to put a finishing touch on this conversation, I think the delineating factor in my mind is debt on a depreciating asset and debt on an appreciating asset, especially if that appreciating asset can turn into cash flow, a positive cash flow situation. Those are two very different things. And he doesn't delineate between the two. He just says, from everything that I've heard from him, debt is the devil. You should only buy with 20% down, and then you should immediately divert all of your cash flow to paying off that mortgage. And I know that's not the strategy that makes people the most wealthy in real estate.
I've always felt like his strategies are geared towards people, or he's coaching people to approach everything with literally like zero risk, the lowest amount of risk possible. And there's no way to build wealth without at least taking on some level of risk. You don't have to be a crazy, day trader or whatever, but his philosophy always seems like it's zero risk, or as close to zero as you can possibly be at every turn. And,
but he didn't build his wealth by not taking risks.
Right. That's right. He's speaking to a certain clientele, it feels like,
Well, and let's be honest though, a good majority of the population is not financially responsible. So he's got an audience. He's speaking to an audience that's going to resonate with debt-free security, that doesn't really understand risk, because with risk comes education and knowledge in what. So for Ben, you guys, Josh, what's risky to somebody else may not be risky to me, may not be risky to you or Kim or anybody else here on this call, because of the education and the background and the control of the risky factors that you put into place. But somebody that has no education in investing whatsoever would be at risk if they just went out there and made decisions without getting educated. So I think that's his biggest audience.
I think that, go ahead, Ben.
Well, just on top of that, yeah, his audience is people without a lot of capital, without a lot of education, but who have, $299 or whatever to give him to kind of tell them how to structure their checking book, basically.
Well, when your only tool is a hammer, everything's a nail. And that is, debt, kill. But I think what isn't fully appreciated in that perspective of everything's a nail is that if you don't move your store of wealth, right? We do something, we create value, we get paid in dollars. If we don't move those dollars, that store of wealth, in something that's going to move faster than inflation or just keep up with inflation, over time, it's like chasing a sailboat and you're trying to swim. Like that power is so powerful that if you're not in a vehicle to catch it, you're just never going to catch it. And what's beautiful about real estate is I can do a 5% down payment, but I get appreciation on the full property. And now I'm using leverage. That's my sail that I get to keep up with, not only keep up with inflation, but the real estate should keep up with inflation or hopefully beat inflation in a good market. But if you didn't pay cash, then your return on investment is going to be exponentially higher because you get the return on the whole asset versus just your 5 or 10% down. And that's the leverage. That's the wind in your sail that helps you get financially ahead. And I just don't think he's properly explaining that.
No, well, I don't think he's even talking about that.
Yeah.
The leverage aspect of your rate of return. He needs to incorporate a little bit more of Kiyosaki in making your money work for you, so you're not always working for your money. Because unfortunately, some of these people that are on his show, and I don't listen to him very often, it's been years since I have, but getting debt free and ringing the bell or whatever they do, they yell I'm debt free, some crazy thing. They're never going to improve their standard of living because of what you just said. They're always going to be chasing inflation. They're always going to have to make more to preserve their standing of living because they have no leverage working for them that's hopefully outpacing it.
That's right. That's right.
So it'll be interesting to see how this plays out, this big public move of isolating one brokerage over all the others. He's been working with Keller Williams agents for decades. They have a recruiting model as well. That's why they're the largest brokerage in North America, is because they have a profit share model. So it's kind of interesting what else might be behind the scenes in his approach here.
Well, if I was going to target out a brokerage, I think I would have to target out a discount brokerage that I realized wasn't attracting the caliber of realtors that I wanted to give professional advice to my clients. So it is very interesting in how maybe there's a beef between the owners or something that we don't know, but it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. I don't know. Maybe they restricted him from being able to buy stock.
That could be it. That could be it.
But interesting to see that play out anyway. Does anybody else have any comments or commentary on that?
Well, I was just thinking as I'm listening to this, just how counterintuitive that model really is. Sorry, somebody turned the radio on over here.
That's okay.
But the model is counterintuitive. Like the average, our 2-bedroom apartment here, we really need a 3, but our 2-bedroom apartment's $1,500 a month. We could get a 3-bedroom house for that, or we could get a 2-bedroom house and put money away. And I could do it on a VA loan and have 0 down if I had the credit for it. That's money then that you can take and putting towards other debts that are, like you said, depreciating, like paying off your car, paying off student loans, things like that, and actually be able to do something with your money then. And then you can take that money and pay your house off.
Yep. Jim, you don't know how many clients I've seen, because we do a lot of stuff for doctors and young medical professionals, especially right when they're out of residency and medical school. And we help them get into a loan when they go into residency. And 5 years later, when their residency and fellowship's over, so 5 or 6 years later, they not only sell their house, they wipe out the vast majority, if not all of their student loans, and still have 5% down for the next bigger house. And conversely, if they'd have been renting over those 5 or 6 years, they'd have the same amount of student debt and they'd be struggling to put together that down payment on the bigger house. So you really do have to get in the game and outpace the rate of inflation by using leverage. If you're, that's the way people that don't have huge inheritances from parents, that's how they get ahead and they get wealthy. And I'm actually going to show you in the presentation, the slides. It's going to be a shorter presentation, but in the slides, I'm going to show you the comparison of the national averages of different income brackets and different net worths, renters versus owners. They're really interesting slide to share with your clients.
Well, even without the specific data, there's a lot of examples, especially in the last decade or whatever. I was just talking to an agent yesterday who's a military guy, 21 years of active service, done several tours of duty, just super, super proud of him. And he was talking about how when he retired, he got into real estate, and one of his military buddies that got transferred to Hill Air Force Base, where he was, just refused to buy. In his mind at first, refused to buy. I'm going to rent. I'm only going to be here 3 years. Then I'm going somewhere else. It doesn't make sense. Well, this was a buddy of his, so he stuck with it and he convinced him that was the right move to do. And he just sold his house and he has almost $300,000 in equity. And he's a military guy.
So awesome.
Until they retire in their pension, they still don't have a big nest egg, right? His wife is a school teacher. That is their net worth.
Yep.
So it changes people's lives.
Yep. Yeah, that's a great story, man. We need to curate as many of those as possible to share with people, because people have a really hard time thinking long-term down the road. Like, how does this impact me 15 years down the road? They just can't see, past the 4th of July or past the end of the month. It's hard to see that far into the future. So it's stories that people learn by.
Well, and you kind of just brought up an interesting point when you're saying looking 15,000 years down the road, because people looking back, seeing what's happened in the last 10 years or even the last 2 or 3 years, right? They're nervous to look forward even a couple more years on what it's going to be, because they're making some assumptions based on uneducated comments. And you've done some great trainings on this, on why there is no bubble, why we're not going to experience a big decline in prices, that people need to be educated on because they're still not taking action. And so they can anticipate, and we've got a lot of great stories of the net worth people have grown in the last few years, but what if it took 10?
Yeah.
What if it took 15 to get that much equity and net worth that you could not possibly accomplish by saving part of your paycheck?
That's exactly right. It's exactly right.
What if people did the same thing with this money that the government's handing out and actually put it into something? And, people are paying off debt and that's all well and good. But I took that money and got my real estate license. Like, put it into something that's going to make more money.
Amen. Well, cool. Jeff, if you're okay, I'm going to kind of jump into this presentation on household wealth and talk a little bit about affordability, housing affordability. But I want everybody to kind of just be in the back of your mind as we're going through this. After this presentation, I hope to have enough time to answer any of your questions on mortgage financing. What's the difference between an FHA loan and a VA loan? What are the credit score difference? What are the loan amount differences? What are the problems with appraisals? Anything that you can think of in terms of questions about mortgages, we'd love to answer. I don't know if I ever really properly introduced Ben, but Ben spent the last decade working solely with military borrowers and doing VA financing. So he is the foremost expert in our company when it comes to VA. So he's a good one there as well. All right, so be thinking about those questions that you might have as it pertains to mortgage and appraisal or anything else along those lines. Okay, can you see my screen okay, Jeff?
Yes.
All right, perfect. So what I wanted to talk about today was some data that I recently curated on household wealth and really the gap in wealth. This is something I've actually been thinking about a lot, is the wealth gap between the haves and the have-nots. And in this particular situation, the data that we curated was specific to homeowners versus renters. So I want to share that information with you. And I also want to share with you, there's a lot of talk about, what's going to pop this real estate bubble is the fact that housing is becoming unaffordable. Well, it is true that the price of real estate has gone up, significantly. In fact, I've got a slide to show that. In Utah over the last year, for example, according to FHFA, the home prices have gone up 19.2%. Now that's probably a little bit more than what CoreLogic would show, because FHFA only measures loans that are within the FHA loan limits. CoreLogic is going to look at all homes, and it's probably less than the appreciation rate that you would see as a median home price. In fact, today I saw an article, something like the median home price nationally was up 24%. That's a little bit misleading, because median is the price where half the homes sell below and half the homes sell above. But the problem is there's very few homes selling below 340,000 because home builders can't build them. And there's just very little first-time home buyer inventory. So the homes that are selling are the more expensive homes, bringing up the median price. That's not really a true reflection of appreciation. So we as realtors should know the difference in that. One thing FHA might say 19.2, CoreLogic might say, I think the national that they came up with was like 12.6. And then the median home price is up 24%. We should know as real estate and mortgage professionals the difference of that. But the point is that the real estate market obviously is soaring, regardless of which of those metrics or systems you use. Real estate values are up. FHA was up 12.6%. Maybe CoreLogic was, somewhere a little bit lower than that. But it doesn't matter. 22, there was double-digit increase in home values. And because of the amount of supply of homes on the market, especially in markets like ours, Arizona, Idaho, Washington, my assumption, my forecast is that we're going to see maybe not 19% appreciation, but I don't see how we don't see double-digit appreciation again, because as long as there's bidding wars, we're going to see massive, fighting for home and appreciation. And the thing that I keep telling clients is that like Jeff alluded to, I'm waiting for prices to go down. I'm waiting for the bubble to pop. Okay, what factors lead you to believe there's a bubble? And basically, I had just a straight out conversation with somebody the other day, and I said, if you're incorrect about the trajectory of housing, when would you like to know about that? He paused for a second, and he's like, I don't know, I guess now. And I'm like, okay, well then let's get into this discussion, because you're coming at this assumption that there's a housing bubble and it's going to pop, not based on logic or analytics or data, but because your uncle told you that, or you heard a talk show or a news commentator. But the reality is, when inventory is down 65% in Utah as compared to last year, and in the United States it's down 52%, when there's that big of a lack of supply and the demand from the millennials, which is the biggest demographic group since the baby boomers, you have until this supply imbalance gets fixed, home prices are going higher. And that could be a while, because we're just not seeing home builders keep up. I mean, there's more millennials turning 33, which is the average age of the first-time home buyer, than there is homes being built. If you remember the slide from a few weeks ago, there's approximately 4 million millennials turning 33, the average age of the first-time home buyer, every year. And there's 1.6 million homes being built. That ain't enough homes. Like, where are we going to get the inventory to change this supply imbalance? So the point that I'm having conversation with client is that there's a correlation between the change in listing inventory and price appreciation. And until we see inventory go up considerably, we're going to see double-digit appreciation rates. And I don't know how long that's going to be, but I can't see builders ramping up to 2-3 million homes per year. The other thing that could change that trajectory potentially would be a massive spike in interest rates. So housing inventory still at all-time lows while demand remains high. And so, oftentimes I'll hear from clients, oh, but housing's getting unaffordable. And so this was a really interesting slide I wanted to share with everybody. This is the payment to income ratio. And this goes back over the last 25 years and says, okay, based on household income, so household, remember that could be a dual income family. What is the amount of that income, the percentage of that income that would have needed to debt service the average home at the average interest rate over the last 25 years? And the answer to that question is the national average is 23.6%. So what that means is if my household income is $10,000 a month, the mortgage payment, including taxes and insurance on that home, would have averaged $2,360 per month, or 23.6% of my gross income. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay. Sometimes I can confuse myself with the numbers, so I got to check in. In the last 5 years, that's been lower than the 25-year average. It's been 20.1% of income. Now, if we think about why that is, housing isn't cheaper in the last 5 years than it was in the 25 years before. Housing's, at least in the last couple years, been more expensive even than the peak years. But what's different is interest rates. So, the fact that you could get a 2.75% interest rate, or maybe today, 3.1 or wherever we're at interest rate, has had a massive impact in affordability. The other thing is income has gone up over the last 25 years. So there's three pieces to affordability, and people only think affordability means home price. So part of our education is to educate clients that when we talk about affordability, it's the price of the home, it's the interest rate on the loan, and it's your income. And incomes have been going up and interest rates have stayed resiliently low. And those two things have offset the higher prices in real estate. Now, today, the average payment to income ratio is 20.5%, which is more than the last 5 years, but it's still less than the last 25 years. So because interest rates are low and incomes have gone up, incomes haven't gone up crazy, but incomes have gone up. Housing is still, as affordable as it has been in the history over the last 25 years. Does that make sense, Jeff?
Yeah, it's super interesting. Where are these numbers put together? What is this Core Logic that puts stuff like this together? If somebody wanted to research this, other than the summarized data that you have, where would they look?
Yeah, I got it from one of the data aggregators that I get all kinds of real estate and mortgage content from, but they always list their sources. So let me just see if I can find it real quick.
It's just super interesting because I think you're right. People just look at home prices and isolate that as the whole equation. It's like they're more expensive than they were last year or over the last 5 years or 10 years. And that's true. But I also look at that supply factor, or the lack of inventory, and the double digit appreciation. If that continues for a few years and then there is a correction, where do these people think it's going to correct to?
Yep.
It's still going to be higher than the prices are today, even with a correction.
Yep. So here's the email that aggregates all this data for me. And it says that Black Knight, a leading provider of data and analytics across homeownership lifecycle, just reported on the issue. And then so Black Knight reported that. You heard of them before?
I haven't. No, I haven't.
Here's their whole April 2021 report. It's probably it's 23 pages long.
Right.
But Black Knight does, all kinds of stuff like, delinquency rates and national delinquency rates, foreclosure rates, all kinds of mortgage data information.
I love it.
Yeah. So I can always, so all this stuff I have comes from an aggregator who pulls content from all kinds of different sources, but they always list their source. So if you ever need it, just let me know. Cool. So let's see, I lost my screen. Bear with me just a second. Where did you go, buddy? There we go. Okay, cool. So what is all that, appreciation that we saw in a couple of so let me just kind of put this to the point. Housing is getting a little bit more expensive. There's no denying that, because interest rates are going up a little bit and housing prices are going up a little bit. But in context of the long term, it's not crazy expensive in terms of a payment to income ratio. So are payments higher? Yeah, probably, but so are incomes. And houses are high, house prices are higher, but interest rates are so much lower. So the question is, does making a higher payment, if we are going into this kind of a higher payment zone where we might see higher interest rates because of inflation, and we're probably going to continue to see higher prices, now we're going to need to justify and make sense to clients. Does making a sacrifice to buy a home today make financial sense in the long term? So we need to start building that kind of value proposition for buying a home versus renting, especially as payments and interest rates potentially start to go up, which I think they will through the end of 2021. And I think they're going to come back down sometime in 2022. But I think we'll see higher interest rates for probably the rest of the year. So I found this information pretty interesting. Household net worth increased $968 billion in the first quarter of 2021 alone. This is homeowner net worth. This is the value of the appreciation of their real estate over one quarter in 2021. And the average annual gain in equity per borrower is $33,400. So, put that in context. If somebody bought a $400,000 house last year and they put 5% down, they put $20,000 down, they gained $33,000 in equity. They made, I don't know, that's like 115, 116, 117% return on their investment in the first year. That's maybe worth a little bit higher house payment, because you're essentially taking money out of your checking account and putting in your savings account in terms of the equity in your home. So something that I think we need to, help borrowers understand. And this was the one that I found was the most fascinating. And again, this goes back to, does making a sacrifice to buy a home make financial sense in the long term? So this is the net worth for, the net worth is greater for homeowners in every income category, and it breaks down their income level. So if they have less than 26,000, 26 to 46, 46 to 74, you get the picture. And then it shows the owner's net worth based on that income level, and a renter's net worth based on that income level. And then it shows the difference. So this is the average net worth for a homeowner that makes between 26 and 46,000 a year. Their average net worth is 140,000 as compared to 6,000.
That's crazy. That's quite a discrepancy.
It's massive. Yeah, it's unbelievable. And that's because the real estate becomes a forced savings where you have appreciation and amortization, and it creates that forced savings over a long period of time that usually people don't trade in and trade out. Usually they keep those over long periods of time and develop big time.
Another thing that affects this, Josh, is they've locked in their home payment. And
yes,
renters are paying more of their income every year.
That's exactly right. We talked about, Jeff, a while back, there was a inflation slide that I'm going to try to show you really carefully, or really quickly if I can. This was the interview I did with Jason Hartman. Yeah, here we go. So this is kind of interesting, right? This is kind of an interesting slide to show people. This is the cost of living in 1971. A new house cost $25,000. Average income was $10,000. Average rent was $150 a month. So, 30 years later, that average rent's probably gone from 150 to 1,500.
Mm-hmm.
But if the person that would have bought a house in 1971 and you know, A, their mortgage is paid off now, but B, that debt had a consistent cost for 30 years. It didn't have rent inflation. The cost of that debt was the same every single month for 30 years, even though the value of the property went up from the average price of 25,000 to, you know, I don't know, that house is worth 500,000, 600,000 now, who knows? So that's a great point, Jeff, that you also avoid the rent inflation over the long term as an owner. And that's probably why their net worth of renters is so much less, right, Jeff? As they make more money, their cost of housing goes up.
Yeah.
Where in an owner's
The expense ratio pretty much probably stays the same with their income increase, right? Their expenses go up as well. And so they don't feel like they're making more money because their expenses go up proportionately. And that was part of that presentation that you gave when you're talking about a $200 payment. Over time, it feels like it is going down, right? Because your income's going up. So it feels like $150 a month. Then it feels like $100 a month. Then because it's such a smaller portion of your income. And I think that in a very simplistic way is the easiest way for a renter to understand this discrepancy here.
Yep. Yeah, spot on. You know, just kind of as I look at this slide, you know, what's coming up for me is mortgage payments increase your net worth, rent payments increase your landlord's net worth. And I think that's, you know, what we really want to drive home with this type of an illustration in response to somebody saying, oh yeah, but housing's unaffordable. And oh yeah, I'm better off just renting and waiting for the bubble to pop. Like, I think this is all the information that we would want to be armed with. So yeah, bottom line, when considering equity gain and weighing the long-term benefits of building net worth, buyers simply can't afford not to buy now. So that's kind of the overriding principle. And then I have to show this, so I'm in legal compliance. Thank you very much.
That's awesome.
And so any questions or thoughts around any of that content that I shared?
No, I think you guys are spot on that. You know, I think the only reason why somebody shouldn't go.
We lost you, Jim.
We lost Jim.
Looks like he went in the tunnel or something.
No problem. He'll probably pop back in a second. The other thing that I'd offer, team, is that I'll send out all these slides to Jeff, and I encourage you to use these in your marketing. Like, these are super simple to, you know, put up on your Facebook or your Instagram and start a whole conversation with your sphere of influence around these slides, because these slides are thought-provoking. And, you know, one of the things that I've found in marketing that is always super successful is to put up a slide like one of these that is insightful and thought-provoking, and ask a question. And you may be blown away. You may get 150 people going back answering the question, but that's a great strategy just to remind your sphere of influence that you're an advisor and you're a real estate professional. So I hope you'll reuse these as marketing platforms for you in your own social media.
They're great visuals because they're conversation starters, because somebody can just look at that without really understanding the back data and really raise some questions in their head, right? It's like, wow, I had no idea.
Totally. Like, let me just give you a quick example. Like, how I might use one of these is, I would, hold on, my PowerPoint is going wonky. There we go.
While you're pulling that up, Kim wants to know what the current interest rates are today.
Oh, good question. Ben, you want to answer that?
Sure. For conventional, still trending around 3 1/8. You know, government, VA, a little bit lower. All, of course, depends on credit. Crappy credit, you're not going to get the best rate. So people need to understand that. But still, we're low 3s conventional, 3 to high 2s on like a VA.
Cool. Thanks. I'm just going to show one last question, one last slide here, and kind of show you how I would use this in my marketing and to create a conversation in my social media. And then I'll turn it back over to you, Jim. I'm glad you're back. I'm not sharing my screen. Am I? Share that screen. Go. Okay. So I would put a picture like this up that shows the year over change in housing inventory. And I'd say, based on our housing inventory going down 65%, comma, do you think home prices are going to go up or down? And then I would just sit back and watch watch people jump in from a million different directions. But what you're doing with that is you're creating something that's interesting and thought-provoking, and you're creating a huge amount of connectivity and interaction in your social media. And the one thing that social media wants is they want connection and dialogue. They don't want you putting links to outside websites. They don't want you selling things. My dog's hair is running around, blowing around the screen. I'm trying to grab it. They want you to create things that are conversation starters and community builders. And so to the extent that you can do that and get a bunch of people to interact and create like a feeding frenzy of activity, Google will actually rank you higher, and it will prioritize you and amplify your message the more connection and the more comments that you have. So putting infographics like that and asking simple questions is a brilliant way to amp your natural Facebook score. Jim, I'm going to turn it over to you, buddy. Sorry, we lost you.
That's all right. You had to make good points there as well. No, I was saying, like, at the moment, really the only reason somebody wouldn't be buying a house is if they're getting to a point where they, how do you put this? If they've got a job that's not going to support the loan, obviously they're not going to be able to get it, right? Somebody that's on, a low wage isn't going to be able to get a house. But somebody that's 16 plus an hour, they can get a house. They may not have the credit for it, but again, us as realtors, we've got connections that can get them that. We've got people like Lindsay and what was that one a few weeks ago, Bolt, that are great resources for getting these guys into houses that are people that wouldn't think they would be able to otherwise.
Well, I think, Jim, we were talking about this earlier today. You get buyers that go get pre-qualified. They're told they can afford $350,000 for a house. And so they go out and they look at $350,000 houses, but they don't have any appraisal gap coverage. They can't cover their down payment and their closing costs. There's other factors at play today that weren't part of the equation before. And so if they qualify for 350, and they just possibly can't even offer 355, they're not getting that house. And so possibly we need to have a conversation with them that encourages them to look at a $330,000 house. And then, like Ben has taught us in previous trainings, how to come up with that appraisal gap coverage. Go back to a previous training that Neo Home Loans has done on that, on how they can play with the numbers and actually create the right scenario if they've got something to work with. And I think, Ben, you were talking about like 10% down is kind of like the sweet spot. Is that right?
Yeah, 10%. Anybody with 10% has room to work that appraisal gap strategy. Yes.
And they don't realize it
Right.
without getting the proper breakdown. And so pointing them in the right direction to the right information is our job, right? I mean, we want to protect them in the transaction, but we've got to get them in the transaction first.
Yeah, and Jeff, speaking of Revive, I think you had alluded to that. We recently, Neo became the preferred lender for Revive, and they're requiring anybody who applies for their product to cross-qualify with us because they want to make 100% sure that an underwriter's underwritten their loan, and they're not going to buy a house for somebody who can't perform. So anybody who doesn't, and there's a discount, they're giving 0.25% off their fees for anybody who ends up using us as their lender as well. Anybody who doesn't know about Revive, they'll actually come in and buy a home for your borrower in cash, making them, in essence, a cash offer. You make the same realtor commission because you represented Revive. Then that client, if they have another home, can sell their home, move their equity, and then purchase the home from Revive. And there's a fee for doing that. It ends up being 2.75% of the purchase price. But when home prices are going up 1.5% a month, 1% a month, in the summer, probably 1.5% a month, it makes more sense to use that strategy than it does to, try to get somebody to take a contingent offer or try to get your offer not accepted in cash. The one big caveat to that program is that the buyer of that home needs to have 20%. They either have to have 20% in cash, and then Revive can turn them into a cash offer, or they need to have 20% in equity in their departing residence, and then Revive collateralize the equity in their departing residence as collateral, and then buys the new house for them. But Jeff, we're starting to see that program absolutely explode in California. A lot of our division is based out of California. And basically what they're telling us is, if you don't have a cash offer, or you don't have, 50% down payment and can close in 10 days, you are not getting an offer accepted in a lot of those, really busy counties. And so I think that's a trend that will continue. It may get harder and harder to get, 30-day contingencies, financing deals accepted. What are you seeing? I'm curious.
On the offer side?
Yeah, just, are you seeing that it's getting more competitive, less competitive? What are you seeing?
I haven't seen much change at all. I wouldn't say it's more or less. I do notice some of the properties I'm looking at are a little bit longer on the market right now. But as far as the offers that come in and the competitive nature on them, I mean, we just closed one that had $100,000 appraisal gap.
Wow.
$100,000. The funny thing is they didn't need to use it because it appraised. So they kept that 100,000 in their pocket.
I don't understand.
So they were willing to pay $100,000 over the appraisal. They had that equity, but they didn't put that $100,000 out in cash because the offer was $900,000, assuming it might only appraise at 800, and that was the loan figures. So then they're bringing an additional 100,000 to the table, but it appraised at 9.
Wow.
So they did their loan off 9.
They were willing to pay 100 over, but they didn't need to.
But didn't need to.
I think those appraisers are starting to catch up, because I had a $100,000 over appraisal buyer, and he had to come out of pocket 70 grand. That was about 2 months ago.
Yeah. So
same price range.
I like the development. That was one of the questions I wanted, was an update on your relationship with Revive, because it's somewhat new, and I like how it's accelerated, that you guys have got your foot in with them, because they have that big contingency of being fully underwritten.
Yeah.
And I think you guys do that better than most.
Yeah, and so just be aware that if you have a client that would like to move up, but they feel landlocked because they'd have to do a contingent offer because all their equity is in their home, or they wouldn't qualify for both mortgage payments, that person is in essence trapped. And that's part of what's freezing up the real estate market is, hey, I don't want to sell my house, and now Xander and Aria are potentially homeless, and now I got to go compete in this insane real estate market. That's scary. But if you can leverage Revive's cash to close in cash and make a more competitive offer, and then I have 6 months to sell my home and buy the new home, like that is part of the thawing of this real estate market as I see it.
I think that's another great conversation starter that we should start using, whether it's in our social media or with our sphere of influence, with our communication with our friends and family, is, are you aware that, we can help you arrange a cash purchase so that you can buy your replacement property before you sell. That would, in my mind, put that intrigue in their mind to say, well, how would that happen? Now you're starting a conversation.
Now think of it from the listing agent presentation though, Jeff. So that's the value on the buyer side that you bring to them. But what if in your listing presentation you said, now, do you have a significant down payment outside of the sale of your house for a new home? No. Do you think you can qualify with both mortgage payments? Probably not in the price range we want to go to. Okay, well then we need to thaw your existing home. And the way to do that, because nobody's going to accept a contingent offer, if you decide to work with me, I have a relationship with a company that will buy the property in cash for you and then give you up to 6 months to update your house. I know you wanted to paint and put the new carpet down, and then list your house to sell. And the minute they close in cash, you get to move into the new house. And then you get to, renovate and sell your home. So I'd build it into my listing pitch that if you list with me, I'll connect you with this company that will buy your home in cash and solve your problem.
So Josh, what are you seeing so far with clients that are doing that, and how they're working out the fact that they still have their house payment on the house they haven't sold, and now they're renting the house that Revive just bought? How have you seen that play out in their liquidity and ability to make both payments?
Well, first of all, most houses, as you know, once are listed, are selling in, days, weeks. So they're not making that double payment very often, for very long, unless they're doing like a renovation or something. But even at that, I mean, if they went out and closed in cash and they had let's say they arranged a cash closing 21 days, that's probably long enough to line up the carpet and the paint, like just very rudimentary improvements. And boom, they move into the new house. That gets done. It's listed for sale. So I'd say in most instances, people are making one rent check to Revive, maybe two. And so they just need to be aware that, you need to have some savings to make that payment before. We had another client who we recommended to them. They had a ton of equity, but no cash. And they were like, I kind of feel scared having both of these outlays. And I'm like, go down to your credit union and just get a $25,000 HELOC. Just free up 25 grand. And that way, if you move into the new home and you get stuck making both payments, or you decide that you want to do some renovation, you've got some cash and you don't feel cash poor. But that person had almost $500,000 in equity, but had gone through a divorce and had literally no cash. So that's another potential solution, is just to get a really small equity line to hold somebody through.
And Josh, from the mortgage side of it, we've of course already completely qualified these people. So we know they can get the loan. And it's not like we have to wait for them to sell their house to start through the rest of the loan process, because there will be an appraisal and title work and all of that. So we can have them all teed up, ready to go. So that as soon as their house is sold, we could even do a concurrent closing, so they're done as soon as their house is sold. That saves the sort of selling the house and now I go do my loan over again.
So Ben, I'm assuming that you also need to run some scenarios with them on their available equity. And let's just say, what if the house that Revive buys for cash doesn't appraise for 103% of what Revive bought it at? They might need to have a little bit of a cushion to do their 10% down or whatever they're doing, and a little bit of equity to cover that difference. But if that number makes sense to them, then that would be a scenario you'd go over with them, right? It's like, this is a potential how it might play out.
Yeah, I mean, you definitely, in this market, because this is a viable option, you also have to talk about the fact that appraisal gap or any sort of issues like that, they've got to keep that in mind as well. So certainly the additional the fee, the 2.75%, but you want to make sure you feel comfortable about, how deep can they go if there's an appraisal issue.
Right. Well, and they would need that conversation whether Revive was buying the property or not. If that
Right.
was their next home, the only difference is they may not have a appraisal gap coverage up front the traditional way, but because of the equity in their home, hey, I've got more options. So I think it's a beautiful marriage there.
And if that listing agent is helping them, they've already done a market analysis anyway, so they're pretty hopefully confident about what that house could sell for. And if it takes another month, it probably sells for more. If it takes 2 months, it's gonna, you know, sell for more than that most likely. So
Hey, one other thing that I learned that Revive did, because they, you know, they reached out to us on a property. It was a new build. The purchase price was 1.2 million. And the client wanted to do a 10-day, no contingencies, close in cash, no contingencies, 10 days, 50 grand earnest money, go. And when Revive did their automated appraisal, they employ appraisers. They don't go to the property, but they pull comps and run, you know, basically do a full AVM. So they do that. They called us and said, hey, we think this thing's going to come in at 1.1. Realtor said, no way. There's 3 other comps that are going to sell in the next 30 days. It'll come in way higher. But basically they just said, can they make an appraisal gap strategy work? In other words, if it comes in at 1.1, do they have enough money? Can you make that strategy work? And we said, yep, already been through underwriting, totally fine. And they said, great. We just want the realtor to tell the client that we're seeing these comps and that it may come in low. And so, you know, that's how we handled it in the past, is we asked the realtor to have a conversation with the client and then with us to show them how we would overcome that in a worst case scenario.
I love it.
There were a few comments in the chat. We'll make sure, I'll email that to you, Ben, and I'll make sure that everybody gets the information on Revive. Any other questions top of mind for anybody?
Great stuff again, Josh, Ben, appreciate you guys.
Yeah, this was awesome, guys. Thanks. I've been a little MIA running around with kids, but awesome stuff. Appreciate it.
Thanks, David. Really appreciate you. I'll send all these slides over to Jeff. Hopefully you all can use it in your marketing. And if there's anything else we can do for you, please reach out to us.
All right, guys, have a good night.
thanks, guys.
Bye.